I spent my life savings fighting the government in a frivolous lawsuit.
Colorado's always been the petri dish as to let's try and see what happens in Colorado before we take it nationwide.
People who want to game the system find it very easy to do so.
I have spies in the Democrat Party.
One of the largest fraud discoveries in, I think, in American history.
The Democrat Party spent $2 million against me to make sure I didn't make it to the general.
Billions and billions of dollars have been fraudulently gamed from the government.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Daily Carry Podcast, episode 102 today. Excited to have a sit down with a couple of guests on set with us this morning. First of all, we've got former Congressman, Congressional District number 4. Did I say congressional? Is that right? Congressman District 4.
Well done.
There we go. And current gubernatorial candidate here in the state of Colorado. We have Greg Lopez on set with us this morning. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you, sir. And we also have his running mate, Taralyn Romero, and excited to have her on set with us as well. How are you today?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning. Doing good.
Glad to hear it. And Micah, back in your chair.
Back from New Mexico.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I had a good trip. It was fun.
A good trip.
33,000 acres of shooting range and awesomeness down in Raton, New Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're starting this episode off right. We're going to start with the dessert, right?
We're going to start with the dessert.
Yeah. So we got an important question that we like to ask on the Daily Carry Podcast, and that's what your preferred carry is. Do you have one of those picked out, or do you like everything?
I like the Shield. It's small.
Smith & Wesson Shield.
Yeah.
That's a popular choice, actually. I
Yeah,
think
it is.
probably more guests than anything have said that one more than anything.
But we have the first time ever we've got a gubernatorial candidate and running mate. So let's clarify that. That's never happened before, which is epic. And I think the running mate just trumped the candidate
That's
as
true.
far as the daily carry because we heard Offset what she carries. So, Taralyn.
Well, it's going to be a cattle prod coming Monday. Yeah. And when I'm not wearing the cattle prod, you guys are going to laugh at this. I have a 22 pea shooter, little 6-shooter revolver. That's my favorite. I've been shooting that since I was a little girl, 8 years old.
I wouldn't make fun of that if you've been shooting that since you were 8 years old.
Yep.
You're probably
my favorite.
deadly accurate with it, aren't you?
Pretty good. Yeah.
And you have a gun pointed right in my direction at the moment, and
safety.
it's making me a little nervous.
It's our training prop.
Yep, training prop. Well, do you have an actual gun that's your preferred carry?
Yep, my 22 revolver.
That's
Yep.
your preferred carry.
That's my
22
preferred carry.
revolver.
I've been using it since I
Bang.
was little. Feels like a friend, you know?
Yeah.
Comfort.
Yeah, comfort.
Yeah, I have a 22 revolver as well that was handed down to me from my grandpa, and I enjoy it a lot. It's a Smith & Wesson K9, something like that. I don't know. It's 12. It's like a 8-shot 22 revolver. It's pretty fun.
That is very
Awesome.
cool.
But we've got some important conversation to have today, so it's been fun to start a little bit lighter hearted on some of the more funner questions that we ask here on the Daily Carry. But you are currently in a race, and you're running on the independent ticket,
That's
right?
correct. That's correct.
So what can you tell us about that? How's that going so far, sir?
It's going very, very well. One of the unique things about running as an independent here in Colorado is I don't have a primary. And so I had to select my lieutenant governor before any of the other candidates because they won't know who's going to the November ballot until the end of June
Right.
during the primary. So I was very fortunate. I met Taralyn several years ago, and she is a top-notch lieutenant governor. Her experience, her background, I will put her up against any other lieutenant governor that might be out there. But I will tell you that the frustration here in Colorado with the political parties is real. The two-party system has really neglected the everyday American, everyday Coloradan. And when we talk to them, they tell us, look, I'm tired of the parties, man. I'm tired of the finger pointing. I'm tired of them not listening to us. They want to do whatever they want. Both sides of the aisle do not really care about us anymore. And so they're anxious and excited to have a third option. And that's what we are going to provide to the people of Colorado, is a third option that really focuses on people. My governing philosophy is pretty simple. It's people over politics, do no harm, and do what works. If we follow that, we should be able to bring Colorado back to its glory days, back to where we all are proud of living in the state of Colorado.
Amen.
What about you, Taralyn? How's the race been going?
Well, this is my first time running for office, never done it before. And it's been a trip. Greg and I have been out canvassing since May 14th, getting signatures to make the ballot in November. We have to get 8,000 across the state, 1,000 per each of the 8 congressional districts. So sometimes we're talking to hundreds of people a day. And that's not something that normal folks do. That's not something that I've done in the past. And so it's been a trip. I think for the most part, people are incredibly kind. They're willing to share their concerns. Every now and then you get a doozy. That's why I'm getting a cattle prod for Monday. But other than that, it's been really neat getting
Can you
to
tell
meet
us
folks.
a little bit about that?
Do
So
you need somebody to do something to you?
yeah, so a couple years ago, how I actually met Greg is I had a government overreach situation. So Jefferson County, 3 elected officials came after my property. I have about a half an acre, and they were trying to take half of it to make it into a public park. And the community was not happy with me for exercising my property rights. They felt like I was taking something away from them when I didn't want to share my property with them. And so very long story short, yesterday I ran into a particular individual, a 6'2" tall guy, who wanted to tell me straight to my face just how he felt about me exercising my property rights. And he had a lot of curse words that he wanted to get out. So he was right. He's right in my space. He was kind of chest chucking me and telling me what an awful person I was for basically taking their, free spot away, which was my backyard.
Was this like an eminent domain thing?
It was actually outside the means of eminent domain. So that is the constitutional way that the government can take property from a citizen is through eminent domain. That's part of the 5th Amendment. I was sued outside the means of eminent domain, so unconstitutionally sued using adverse possession and prescriptive easement, which is what civilians use if we want to take a land from our neighbor. We use adverse possession and prescriptive easement. That's for civilians. It's not for the government. So I was actually sued unconstitutionally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, this caught me sideways. I went through something like that. That's why
I'm still
Oh, you
a
did?
little
Sorry
bit
about
caught
that.
up on a cattle prod.
Yeah.
And wondering what that would feel like. To get
I'm
hit
trying to
with
figure
one of
out why
those.
a dude to come up and chest bump a girl and get in her face and.
That's easy.
People
People are crazy.
Yeah,
It's the evil world we're living in. That one's
ticks
easy.
me off.
I'm more interested in the cattle prod because that's the antidote. I think.
Yeah.
That's what do you have in follow up to that question, Micah?
So did that was that a motivator for office? I mean, a legitimate motivator for office?
It's funny. I said I would never run for office. And when I was going through that horrible ordeal, when you're sued unconstitutionally, it's not a fun thing to go through. I spent my life savings fighting the government in a frivolous lawsuit. And Greg Lopez here, was one of the only individuals who I had reached out to begging for help. I was seeking help wherever I could get it. And he came out to my property. He met with me. He walked the land. He understood the situation that I was going through, and he sought to help me. We actually met several times during that whole ordeal. And
Was he congressman at the time?
were you?
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
So retired congressman.
Well, no, this was pre-congressman.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So,
Interesting.
yeah, so, some may remember that I used to be the mayor of Parker, Colorado.
Okay.
And so when I was mayor, I was elected at the age of 27, and it was a strong mayor. So I was the mayor and the city manager.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood land use, I understood adverse possessions, and so we got introduced. I went up there to look at it, and I was giving, and like Taralyn said, I understood exactly what she was going into. And so we just had a conversation about what she might be able to do. But I wasn't an elected official at that time. I was just a regular citizen that had a lot of background on government. And so I was just sharing my knowledge with her.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but to your point, it was a catalyst, and it's funny how life works out. Greg was a bright light during a very dark period in my life. When anyone wants to come and help you, when you're going through the worst time of your life, your property is being seized potentially by the government. You're spending your life savings. Things are upside down. He was a very bright light, and luckily, I got through that. And in 2023, I settled with Jefferson County, and I was able to keep the majority of my property. But it was this year where Greg reached out and gave me a call, and he said, "Hey, I'm running for governor on an independent ticket. Would you be interested in seeing if you'd be a fit for lieutenant governor?" Now, normally I would have said absolutely not, but ever since I got unconstitutionally sued, I have been helping people all over America fight against government overreach in Texas, Tennessee, New Jersey, Nevada, Arizona, to name a few, and right here in Colorado. And so I thought, you know what, let's take a look at this, because I do like fighting for people, and I really don't like when government overreaches. And Greg's a great guy, so it was an easy yes.
Well, amen to that. I went through something similar. I'm not going to go through my story, but I will tell you, I've met, because of what I went through, about a dozen very, very similar stories, and a couple in state, mostly out of state, old farmland, Kentucky property that my family had. It was right at 1,100 acres, and they were taking almost 900. And so it was a back and forth with the county, and they ended up conceding and leaving it alone. But it was about a 4-year battle, with the entire family. So,
Yeah, they don't wrap quickly. Mine wrapped in about 8 months, so record time. But that was only because I took my plight public and created a lot of public pressure for them. Otherwise, it would have been years easily.
Well, ours was hillbilly land. It was more, think Hatfield and McCoy's on steroids. So there was the Richardson clan, and then the county we were in, and the Richardson clan was actually pretty big. So yeah, we had a lot of backing. But yeah, it was a real struggle, and there was a lot of money spent on that. So
yeah, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, I mean, in the end, it all works out. But
Yep.
yeah, it was a fight.
Yep, always is.
Yep.
So, Greg, I'm interested to hear some policies that you're hoping to bring to the table to help Colorado. I'm assuming former Republican. Right?
Yes.
So I'm assuming that some of your policies will be relatively conservative, hopefully mostly common sense. But I'm really interested to see what your pulse on Colorado is as a whole. We have a lot that is being mismanaged in this state.
Yes, we do.
To just say a little.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on taking office and taking charge and fixing things? What does that look like?
You know what? One of the things that I like to remind people is that I'm running as an independent, but I grew up as a Democrat. And so understanding, that whole political ideology, when I got elected mayor in Parker, I was a registered Democrat. Now, Douglas County is a strong Republican county, and I got elected back in 92. So people were shocked that a Democrat got elected in Douglas County. And I changed parties in the middle of my administration. So I was a sitting mayor when I became a Republican. Wow. And so for the last 30 years, I've been a Republican. I will tell you that as I went to Congress and I came back, I recognized, these parties no longer are really caring about the people. They just want to stay in office. They just want to get reelected. And when you look at the decisions that people are making today, you can see that they're just catering to the winds of the political times because they just want to get elected. So one of the things that I'm looking at is, understanding you got to make decisions with visionary glasses. You can't make decisions based on what's going to happen in the next election cycle. You can't be looking at the midterms. You got to look at, when I make a decision, it's going to be a 15, 20-year decision. What is the impact? So one of the things that I'm looking at is, of course, water. First of all, let me tell you this. Colorado's in a crisis. Everywhere you look, Colorado's in a crisis. I can't think of a single area that I will tell you Colorado's doing well in, whether it's education, whether it's our drugs, whether it's public safety. Our roads suck here in Colorado. They need a lot of attention, right? Our schools are failing our children. Our budget is not being managed correctly. We have a $1.7 billion shortfall walking into the next the next year. And it's because it's all about mismanagement. And so I don't forget where I come from. $1 means a lot to me. My mom and dad grew up working in the fields. My dad had a 6th grade education, never learned to read and write. My mom has a 10th grade education. But what they taught us boys is, surround yourself with good people, stay out of trouble, go to school, learn, and you can live the American dream. And the biggest crisis that Colorado is facing now is the quality of life. everybody's quality of life is being dampened by the decisions of government. Taralyn mentioned it earlier. Government overreach. Government wants to be in every aspect of our lives. These flock cameras that they want to put on the highways, that where all of a sudden they're going to send you a ticket if they can tell you that you went too fast from point A to point B. These AI data centers, where's all this information going to go? I'm not a strong supporter at all of a data center right now. The jury's still out, but there's a lot of problems that we need to evaluate. One of the things that I talk about with the younger generation, right, is renters now are paying anywhere between $2,100 to $2,300 a month. That's a mortgage payment in my mind, And so why don't we allow renters to be able to deduct from their income tax their entire year's cost of rent? Homeowners get to do that. When they first buy a house, they get to write off predominantly the first several years of their mortgage off their income tax. Why shouldn't we not do that for renters? Puts a little bit more money in their pockets, right? And we really want people to have a disposable income. The younger generation is telling me today, look, all I do is work. I don't have any disposable income. I go to work, I come home, I just do it to pay the mortgage, to feed my family. And so we need to get back, rolling back all these unnecessary regulations that the state has been doing. We know what it feels like, guys, to live under a single party rule. We've lived under a single party rule for 8 years now, and they're not listening to us anymore.
So you went Democrat to Republican while in office? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
What was so there's a metamorphosis that takes place there. What was the driver that initiated it?
It was an interesting, I'll try to fast track because there's a lot of backstory to this, but one of the things that I did as mayor is I would go to the schools and talk to all the kids, right? Regardless of what grade I was in talking to them, I always got this question: what party are you and why? And my answer was always, I'm a Democrat because my mom and dad are. After a while, that answer didn't sit well with me. It's like, I should have a better answer than that. And so I studied the national platforms. I studied the Republican platform. I studied the Democrat platform. And after 8 weeks, my wife and I determined, you know what? We're really conservative. We're Republicans. We're not Democrats. We watch our fiscal responsibilities. We don't like government in our lives. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity by working hard, right, and having ability to live the American dream. So, yeah, as a sitting mayor, I became a Republican, but I studied the national platforms. So that way I could answer the question as to why are you now a Republican? And there's so much with international trade, the death penalty, foreign policy, education, charter schools, vouchers, choice, all those types of things.
Interesting.
So what were you doing up until that point? You said you got elected as mayor of Parker at 27 years old?
Yes.
So what were you doing before that got you to the point of having the influence and the popularity in a place like Parker and Douglas County to be a Democrat and still be elected as mayor? What did life look like before that?
Well, it's an interesting, because I go back and I look at my early days and I kind of shake my head. It's like, I can't imagine a 27-year-old doing what I did. But I think it was a nasty rumor that I was going to be running for mayor. Okay, so I'm a veteran. I'm a disabled vet. I served in the Air Force. And when I left the Air Force, I became a financial advisor. So I knew stocks and bonds and mutual funds and the financial markets. I come home one evening. My wife says, you need to go to this meeting. I said, what meeting? She goes, the water district is claiming, or the metro district is filing bankruptcy. And our taxes are going to go up and our fees are going to go up. I need you to go find out more about it. It's like, I don't know any of these people. So trying to keep the wife happy, right? I went.
Important.
Very important. Been married 38 years. I'm like the Nike commercial, right? Why ask why? Just do it.
Just do it.
Yep. And so I went. And there was probably 6 residents in this room and 4 individuals in the front. And I found out that there were the bondholders and the attorney. So I started asking questions about the debt. I started asking questions about the bonds. what is the level of bonds? What's the recallable dates? What's the maturity dates? They were not expecting those types of questions. Fast forward, I got drafted to be the homeowner president of the association. And so at that time, we had our son. And back then, there was this, I don't know what to call it. There was a period of time where they were talking about a shaking baby syndrome, where a lot of the babysitters and moms were getting frustrated. They would shake their babies and could hurt their spine. And so we have no family in Colorado. And so I volunteered, interestingly enough, to stay home the first year and be a stay-at-home dad. So I raised my son for the first year. And so that was when I started getting involved and listening more to what was happening in the town. And when I decided to run, I decided that I was going to see what I could do more for the people, because when I went to the town hall meeting, asked for help for the water district, I'll never forget this. The mayor looked at me and she said, "That's not our problem. That's a quasi-governmental entity." And I said, "Well, I live in the town. I'm a resident of this community." She goes, "Yeah, but that's not something we care to deal with." And when she told me that, it's like, okay, you know what? She's not willing to help her own residents. It's time for her to go. And I ended up beating her by 27 votes.
Wow.
I worked
27 votes.
I worked for a sheriff that won by 54 votes.
Yeah. Every vote counts.
And he sat down and he said, "Man," he goes, "if it hadn't been for my family and a couple guys down the street, I wouldn't be sheriff." I was like, so true.
Yeah, I mean, so to answer your question, I was a homeowner president. I didn't realize it was the biggest subdivision in the town at the time, but I didn't know anybody. I'd only been in the town for a little over a year. So I barely qualified to actually run for office. But what I did is I went and talked to people. I basically went, knocked the doors. I went to a homeowners association, and I listened. You know, I'm a reader. So I read all the master plans. I read the budget. I read everything there was to read. So at least I could have an intelligent conversation about what's going on. So I was very fortunate. I learned everything to learn about building a community.
So 38 years. How many kids?
2.
Taralyn?
One stepdaughter. She's going to be 15 this year.
15.
Yes.
I'm 32 years. My kids are 28 and 24.
Yep.
My son is almost the exact same age as Jared. And I was sitting out. He just got back from Japan. He's been gone for 6 months, working remote for the law firm he works for. Been overseas. My daughter's over in Iran right now in the Straits of Hormuz and driving an aircraft carrier. And hopefully coming home. We found out she called us the other day and said, "Looks like I'm coming home in July." But I say that to say this: the American dream. You're a young guy. You go out. You learn something you don't like, and you're like, pound sand.
Right.
I'm running for office. You go in, you win. You figure out an office. You said something that was really important, and I want to ask you the same question in a second. You realize, wow, we sat down for 8 weeks. We evaluated, and we thought, this is not who we are. But we did this because our parents did it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, Taralyn, that this generational thing that we're seeing in politics, I think it's a generational thing. I think in most cases it's a generational thing. What's your take on it? Do you think people vote the way their parents voted?
I don't think so anymore.
You think it's changing?
I do think it's changing. I think a lot of the young kids actually disagree with their parents on a lot of political issues. You know, I think a lot of folks are still beholden to the party politics, right? There's an identity that people associate with, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. And the youth that I've talked to are really saying, I'm neither.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I don't like the whole thing. It's two wings of the same bird. So that's my experience. I feel like the youth are really stepping away and saying that's not for me, regardless of what their parents are doing.
That's what, and the reason I said that about my son being the same age, just because we just had this conversation. He's been back 3 days. And one of the conversations we had was just because he's got his vote now, right? He got the ballot in the mail, and he said, "Yeah, I'm not feeling it. Here's where I'm headed." And it's funny because we always grew up in a very conservative household, and it's not because, and I don't mean like the way you would term Democrat or liberal or anything like that. He's just an independent thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's looking at it and he's like, Dad, I've really analyzed this and here's my thought process. And it's funny because they're the same age, and Jared's a go-getter and an entrepreneur and all of that. And Zach's, he used Jared as an example last night in conversation. He's like, I want people like Jared. Even though they're the same age, he goes, I see and admire what he's done and he's accomplished it at a young age. He goes, I wish more people would do that. Like, that's a big deal.
Well, and to add to your point, look, I think the younger generation.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Hey, you're a role model. As much as you don't want to be a role model, right? People are watching.
Yeah, they
You know,
are.
your generation is watching and finding who are their leaders, who are the people that are achieving things that perhaps they thought they couldn't achieve. And so, and that's the other thing, right? We do what we do. We never realize that we're going to become role models. We don't do it because we think that there's others that are going to follow us.
Yeah.
We do it because it's in our DNA. You know, that's our character. And we show that we will stand in the gap. You know, Taralyn fighting for her property rights. What owner would not do that? Now, she went the entire length of the field by going into lawsuits, right? And proving that, you know what, at the end of the day, you as an individual, the power of one can overcome government if you stick to it. Is it going to be easy? No. But Taralyn and I understand the challenges and the struggles of everyday Coloradans. We've been in those battles. And so we will make sure that we don't bring that type of struggle to more people.
Yeah.
And right now in Colorado, guys, here's the numbers. And people don't like them, but these are the numbers. 50% of the active voters in the state of Colorado are independent voters. 25% are Democrat, and 23% are Republicans. The major parties today are minor parties when it comes to the election cycle. And so right now you'll hear both sides of the aisle say, I got to win the independent vote. We got to win the unaffiliated vote, right? Because they're disconnected from the struggles of everyday families.
Yeah.
So I'm Colorado native, born and raised here. I love this state. I hate the direction that the state's headed in, and I hate the direction that it's been headed in for quite some time now. If there's not a course correction, I can tell you right now firsthand that some of the highest quality, highest caliber, most incredible people that have been customers of businesses here, but not just customers, much more importantly, friends of me, my family, and friends of friends, have already left this state because of how bad things are.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is a course correction this election cycle before things are too far gone, before people like me who are born and raised in Colorado say there's no more hope. This state's gone. It's evil. It's corrupt. It's broken, and it's clearly not going to be fixed. This year's very important, and so I think a very important question to people out there that I even have myself is how can we have momentum on an independent ticket whenever historically it just hasn't had any momentum?
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking at? What metrics are you using? What are you looking to calibrate the likelihood of success on an independent ticket rather than as broken and as corrupt as people can argue both sides of the political parties are, which I agree. I don't think either party is going to help the state as much as they say. I still do think right now we are getting to the point of it's just blatant evil and good. Unfortunately, there's still evil on the good side, being in the far right wing side of Republican spectrum. But the question is, this middle road, this independent ground, we haven't seen it have any success in any prior elections historically. So what are you doing to combat that? And what are your insights as to how you could potentially be effective as an independent candidate rather than somebody who could potentially split the vote from the Republican ticket?
No, I think that's a fair question. Look, I consider myself a compassionate conservative. My values have not changed. The only thing that's really changed is the letter behind my name, okay? You know, people say, well, you're no longer a Republican. It's like, well, I changed jerseys, but my values have not changed. And I look at it from the standpoint, okay, if 50% of the voters are not happy with either side of the aisle, they're trying to tell us something. They're trying to tell us, you know what? We don't believe the state's going in the right direction. I can't tell you, Jared, how many times I've heard people say, stop Colorado from becoming California. And that's what we're becoming. That's what we almost there. But Governor Polis told us that he was going to fundamentally change our state. And everything he's done has been nothing but duplicate what California is doing. And so we have to put a stop to it. The other thing a lot of people forget is that most independent candidates don't have the resume that I have. I am the second highest elected official running for governor. The only person that beats me is Senator Michael Bennet, but I'm Congressman Greg Lopez. That's higher than the Attorney General. That's higher than a state senator. That's higher than a House representative. And so I have the second highest ranking title. I've been elected. I have run communities. I'm the former director of the United States Small Business Administration here in Colorado. I understand small business. I understand the importance of Main Street, of what makes communities. I'm the former president of the Denver Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so the minority communities are telling me, we don't like the Democrat candidates. Greg, we're so happy you became an independent because now we can vote for you and not feel guilty because we're not voting for a Republican. And it comes back to that old ideology, right? It's like once a Republican, always a Republican. Once a Democrat, always a Democrat. Well, the younger generation is like, no, we've seen the struggles when a Republican is in charge. We've seen the struggles when a Democrat's in charge, and nothing's really changing. You know, life is getting harder and harder. I'm going to bring solutions. And the good thing about this, Taralyn and I are going to be we're not going to be accused of playing politics because we don't have a political ideology with us. We're solving problems. And so I can hold the Democrats accountable if they're doing something bad, like trying to introduce legislation to legalize prostitution. You know, the governor never said anything about it, you know. And if the Republicans are trying to do something good, I can speak on their behalf because we are the voice of the people. We're the only ones that are elected statewide by every registered voter. So we will be the voice of the people. And as I'm going out there and telling out there, like she said, we're talking to hundreds. People have said enough. They're ready to try something different. Now, I want to tell you, we're not going to win by a landslide. This is not going to be an easy task for us. We have chosen the hardest path to become governor and lieutenant governor because we don't have a, quote, political machine behind us. But what we do have is people understanding that we are going to put them first. We're not going to play politics. And so right now it's interesting because everybody, the Republicans are nervous that I'm going to take votes away from them. The Democrats are nervous that I'm going to take votes away from them because I'm here to tell you the Hispanic community and the Black community and small business owners that typically vote for Democrats, they're telling me we're voting for you. We've had enough of these other individuals. And so it's going to be an interesting race.
So you're, how do I frame that? Well, first of all, let me ask you a question. You know Chris Hernandez?
Yes.
So Chris reached out to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've known Chris for, gosh, I won't hold this against you, by the way. 20, it's got to be 20 years now.
Right.
And he called me up, and this is, oh my gosh, Greg, this is going back months and months ago. He goes, you've got to sit down and talk to Greg. And I said, love to. Tell him to come down.
Right.
For whatever reasons, it's taken some time. But what's interesting is Chris, I think he has said the same thing to me that you just said. Hearing it come from you is very impactful, but because Chris is very impassioned over this. He is like, Micah, I mean, Christian values, I have walked this journey. If you ever get the chance, you would love Chris. We got to get him in here sometime. He's just a good man. But I think he's a representative of very much the demographic, not only that you guys are going after, but who's coming to you and talking. And he's like, I'm broken. I'm tired. I'm tired of watching what we fought so hard for being stripped away in this two-party system. And to Jared's point, independents it's not always been a stronghold, but your race really doesn't start, in my opinion, until July 1st. Right. I mean, because you gotta wait to see what happens in the next 5 days.
Yep.
And then you're gonna know what your trajectory is.
Yep.
At a bare minimum. And so then it becomes a 3-horse race, so to speak, right?
It does, because I have statewide name recognition. Name recognition is something that, you always want to enhance it, but I already have it. Okay. And what do people do when they're running for office? They need name recognition, right? And so the debates that'll come, the forums that'll come, people will actually, for the first time, and I think Colorado is going to get national attention, because you're going to have a Democrat candidate, a Republican candidate, and an independent candidate, and all qualified based on what they believe can make Colorado a better state for all of us. So there's going to be a lot of national attention coming to Colorado to see what is Colorado going to do. We've always been in the front, guys. Who was it with the first 2 states that legalized marijuana?
Yeah.
Colorado. Colorado's always been the petri dish as to let's try and see what happens in Colorado before we take it nationwide. And so I think it's going to be a very interesting election. And what I find the most encouraging is I have spies in the Democrat Party, okay? And they tell me, Greg, they're worried about you. They're very worried because they took me out in 2022 in the primary. I was in the primary ballot as a Republican running for governor against Heidi Ganahl. And the Democrat Party spent $2 million against me to make sure I didn't make it to the general. And they succeeded. I lost by 49,000 votes across the state. That's nothing.
Yeah.
And then Heidi, unfortunately, she lost to Jared Polis by 485,000 votes. I took that card away from the Democrat Party because now they got to deal with us in the general, not the primary.
Right. Sorry. I probably looked like I had a thought there. I was just taking a deep sigh.
I thought that you had a thought there, but that's okay.
I have an opinion on something. I'm going to hold it for a minute because I do want to get to. Can I ask you? I'm going to call it a sensitive question, I guess. So we went shooting with Scott Bottoms, and Scott he straight out said, as Bart Kirkmeyer has said as well, they're not going to support Victor Marks if he's the front runner.
Barb said that too?
Barb said that too.
I didn't hear her say that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Well, she said it off air, but she's also said it in
it would
platforms.
make sense just based on recent actions.
Yeah.
The first time she was on our show, she said she would. So that's why I'm having a little bit
no,
of
she switched.
Channel 9.
She switched.
She straight out said it on a platform. Yeah.
Yep.
On the debate platform. But Scott said something very interesting because people like, so you're going to vote for Democrat? And he's like, oh, no, there's another option. And he said, I'm going to support, for some reason, if I don't win and Victor Marks is the front runner, he's not going to support him. He's going to vote for you. How do you feel about that?
Scott and I go back, and Scott's a good man. He called me when he said he was going to run for governor. And he said, what do you think, Greg? He goes, because I voted for you last time. I said, you know what? Look, I haven't decided if I'm going to run or not. But, hey, if you feel that you need to run, by all means. I think what Scott is realizing, and I think more people are realizing, is that, you know what? Maybe it's time that we start looking at the character of the people versus the letter behind their name. Because what Scott is saying is, look, the character and the experience and the background of a Victor Marks is not the type of governor that I believe Colorado deserves. And so he's not basing it on, in my opinion, he's not basing it on whether he likes the gentleman or not. He's basing it on, can he actually do the job? You got to remember, this is 6 million people, 16 different departments. And he appoints over 3,000 people to boards and commissions. This is not a popularity contest.
Right.
This is about the quality of life of every Coloradan, from the young kids that are going to kindergarten all the way to the retired people, the new development, the younger generation. And so what Scott is saying, look, Greg has proven that he can govern. Greg's proven that he has the experience. And if I have the choice between someone that is a newcomer that doesn't understand anything, between someone that I know is conservative, know that he's a religious man, know that he will do the right thing and govern with a steady hand, then I'm going to vote for Greg. But that's happening across the state. I'm hearing that from people that support Barbara Kirkmeyer. I'm hearing that, you know what, if she doesn't get on the ballot, I'm voting for you. And I'm seeing now other independents are like, wait a minute, there's an independent running? Like, yeah. So people are starting to pay attention to the actual election itself. And when they find out that I already have a lieutenant governor, right, and they look at Carolyn's background, she has 25 years experience in the medical industry. One of the biggest challenges our state budget faces is Medicaid. You hear about the fraud. You hear about the waste in all those programs.
So did you start when you were 4?
No, I started when I was 19. So I went to college while I was working my way up the corporate ladder. And I did that for, like Greg said, 25 years. Started as a claims data entry specialist. And
I'm just kind of not thinking you're, okay, whatever. You claim to be that old, that's fine.
45.
All right.
I never used to say my age, but I'm getting it a lot. They're like, you look too young. I'm like, I'm 45. 45.
Okay. Well,
And some days it's clearer
compliments
than
to your 45.
Yeah.
25 years experience. I thought, because just so you know, that's not just a direction at you. My wife says that all the time when somebody comes up and they're like, you have a kid that's 28. She's like, well, I was 7 when I had him.
All right. So I want to know, and I'm sorry if I keep on kind of like, if it feels like I'm just putting a sledgehammer to the same point question, then that's fine. But I'd like to know, whenever you made the decision to run as an independent, what did that look like? Did you have a team of analysts? Did you have anything like that you were looking at this thing on more than a surface level? Or what did the process look like? Did it just look like, there's 50% independents in Colorado, so I'm going to run independent? What did that look like? What was the insights and the calculation behind that decision?
I think that's a great question because it's important for people to understand how I make decisions. How do I look at things, right? Because this is what a governor does. And so I was running as a Republican, watching how the election was processing, watching the Republican Party talk about Hatfields and McCoys here in Colorado, looking at the strength of the organization and evaluating what's it going to look like a year from now? What's it going to look like 6 months from now? As a small business owner, you always have to look into the future. You can't make decisions only based on today. And what do you want to make sure that you achieve the goal that you're achieving, that you're seeking? And so it was December. I remember calling some of the leadership in the Republican Party and saying, hey, where are you guys with the state assembly? Where are you with all these planning that you need to do? And they were nowhere. Now remember, this would have been the 3rd time that I would have gone to a state assembly. And so I looked at it and I said, these guys are not ready. They're not going to be able to support a candidate. The Republican Party is not going to be able to support a candidate running statewide. And it proved itself because they're broke. And so I said, okay, so what is the path? If you want the people to make a decision, what is the path for you? And the path was, I'm not going to become a Democrat because that's not who my values are. So my option is be an independent. What does that look like? Well, being an independent means there'll be a lot of Republicans that'll turn their back on you. Why? Not because you changed who you are. I mean, this happened overnight, guys, right? I announced that, I'm talking to somebody the week before. They think it's great. I'm a Republican. I'm running for governor. 5 days later, I announce I'm an independent. And that person's like, okay, I'm done with you. So you realize quickly, they really weren't looking at the character of the person. They were looking at what jersey are you wearing? And so when I decided I'm going to run independent, I knew that there would be a lot of support that would pull back, a lot of funding would pull back. But ultimately, it's not about me. It's about making a difference. And so I prayed about it. I looked at it. I talked to my wife about it. I talked to my team about it. And we decided, you know what? This is probably the best path for you to have the best opportunity to represent the people. It wasn't until after the fact that we started looking at what do the numbers look like? What, what is the registration? Because it's about being the voice. And maybe it's because when I was 27 and I was in charge of the town of Parker, I recognized that every decision I made impacted 10,000 families in the town. It wasn't about one community. It wasn't about this part of the town versus that part of the town. It wasn't about, well, we should put a park over here, a roundabout over there. How does this play in its totality? And I think that's what's forgotten about politics today. You got to look at the entire picture, not just that little segment that's going to get you elected.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I appreciate that you said you prayed about it. We like to talk about faith on this. We'll get into that in just a little bit. I'm going to ask a couple more questions just on the issues that we're facing in Colorado. I'm going to have a first question for you, Greg, and you can piggyback and answer that as well if you'd like to, Taralyn. But then specifically knowing your medical background, I'd like to also two-part this question, because the first question is going to be what your thoughts are on any issues or concerns with election integrity in the state of Colorado. The second question is going to be the amount of not just waste or mismanagement, but fraud. It's actually this week that Nick Shirley's in town. He's actually going to be right down the street from here. And Nick Shirley has, we're going to talk. Nick Shirley has uncovered all kinds of fraud in different states. He was in California, and he's done a lot of pieces on Medicaid fraud, voter fraud, all that. But those two seem to be very much connected. We've got these concerns with election integrity, and we've also got these concerns with just straight up blatant fraud. So I'd like to know your thoughts first, and then maybe we can pass the question to Taralyn after you've answered your thoughts on those two questions.
Sure. Look, it's interesting, right? We used to never have a question about election integrity until we embraced the mail ballot. When we went to the polls, when we stood in line and the election results came, there was never a question, are the elections being done correctly? It wasn't until the mail ballot came in that changed. And I will tell you, when I was a sitting mayor, there was discussion amongst council that they wanted to go to a mail ballot for town elections. And I told them, no, as long as I'm the mayor, we're never going to do that. And here's why. Women fought hard to be able to vote, and they wanted to stand in line. Other communities fought hard for the right to vote. We're not going to disrespect their battles by saying we're going to vote at the kitchen table. We only ask you to vote twice every 2 years. You will stand in line for a concert. You will stand in line for a Bronco game. And you're telling me you will not stand in line to elect your leaders?
A flippin' men.
And so it's like, no. So I will tell you, some people, Greg, but the machines, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I can't speak to the machines because I'm not a computer geek, but I will tell you this.
No offense to any of the computer geeks out there, okay?
Right? I don't mean that in any way. It's harder to manipulate an election if there's 3 candidates. It's easier to do it with 2. But you have 3? Now it's a challenge, okay? And I will tell you that I believe we are going to get it right. I believe that because it's going to be a close race, because now there's 3 candidates, I think the election integrity issue is going to be resolved because people will feel that, these election was handled correctly. Because President Trump is also putting another light on what's happening, right? He's talking about it. So everybody's got to be a little careful about how they're handling the elections in the counties and how they're doing it at the state level. When it comes to fraud, look, there is no doubt in government that there's always fraud, waste, and abuse. There always is. Look, the bureaucrats take advantage of what they have because it's always easier to spend other people's money, and they feel like, well, if I could create a new program, make some people happy, then I can go home feeling like I did my job. But they're not thinking about where they're getting that money from, right? And so there is, guys, in politics is a nasty, nasty game, if I can call it that. when I was, people asked me, Greg, why don't you run for Congress again? It's like, guys, you're asking me to join the mafia. It's about money, power, and control. It's not about doing the right thing for people. I, as a sitting mayor, had 2 occasions where a developer came into my office, talked to me about a development, and he said, you know what, Mayor, this will be good for the town, this will be good for the community, and this will be good for you. And I stopped him right there.
Oh.
I said, you know what, it's time for you to leave the office. He's like, why? I said, I know what you're trying to tell me. I said, you never throw my name into anything that's good for this community. Because what he was trying to say, it was going to be good for me financially.
Yeah.
And this is what happens, So you got to have strong character to say no. And you got to have leadership that explains to all those underneath you, you will not do that. And if you do, you're going to be held accountable to the highest level, And I think it's because I come from humble beginnings. The money that government has belongs to the people, doesn't belong to the government. Our job is to spend it wisely. Our job is to make sure that it's used in a manner that's going to improve the quality of life. Most elected officials believe they have to just spend it and not ask. Jared, here in Colorado, the way they manage the budget, and I've asked Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer and Representative Scott Bottoms why they don't push to change it. And I can understand when they say, well, we're outnumbered. Okay, that's not the question I asked you. But here in Colorado, they use what they call baseline budgeting. Now, what does that mean? Baseline budgeting means is they're not going to talk about what they spent last year, because last year's cap is the baseline. They're only going to talk about the new money that they're looking to spend. So they never evaluate what they spent last year. Now, think about it as a small business owner. If you don't evaluate what you spend last year to create your budget for next year, then you're never really going to understand how good your business is. It's time to go to zero-based budgeting. And that means go back to zero on every line item. Every department has to explain why they still want to do this program, why they still believe we should spend millions of dollars on something that has yet to provide any real results. Why? Ask that question, right? This is what budgeting and management of people's money is all about. It's not about how quickly you could spend it, and it's not about being Santa Claus and giving everybody everything they want. So there's a lot of fraud, and I think the biggest area is in the healthcare industry, and that's specifically why, when I ran into Taralyn and we talked about it, I felt that, she brings a lot of strong qualities about her, but she also understands the Medicare area, and she cares. She cares about people. It's not just a number on a balance sheet. It's what is it doing to people? And that's what I'm about, is helping people.
Yeah, sadly, in 25 years in healthcare, it has only gotten more complicated, right? No surprise to anyone. And I think the unfortunate downside of that, and there are many, is that people who want to game the system find it very easy to do so because it is so complicated that it can be hard to kind of figure out what someone's doing unless you've spent 25 years in the industry. The federal government, I think this week, just came down on one of the largest fraud discoveries in, I think, in American history. Billions and billions of dollars have been fraudulently gamed from the government and largely by providers, doctors, and nurses who are creating fake claims, fake companies. That's happening at the federal level all across the country. And here in Colorado, we've had similar instances. As I was peeking into it after Greg reached out, I said, let me get a little bit smarter on what's happening here in Colorado with our Medicaid and healthcare cost. I was aghast to learn that we literally pissed away $303 million on non-emergency medical transport because the Medicaid department here in Colorado had an administrative error in what they were communicating to doctors. And it took them 2 years to catch the error. So they weren't even watching the money. They weren't operationally, I think, savvy as to what they were doing at the same time. And $303 million just got pissed away. And then the federal government came after us because we overpaid on autism therapy, requesting millions of dollars back. I think we had a 100% failure rate with autism here in the state. And so the fraud, waste, and abuse is very real. But coming from the private commercial sector of healthcare, fraud, waste, and abuse is something that you tackle proactively to save money in the future. And here in Colorado, our Medicaid department, HCPF, Healthcare Policy and Finance, has grown by 73%, I think, in the past 6 years or so. And at the same time, they have a stack of cases sitting on someone's desk that they say they don't have the staff to manage to look at the fraud, waste, and abuse. And when you look at fraud, waste, and abuse, again, it's a proactive measure. For every dollar invested, you can expect about a 35 multiple return for money saved. And they're just sitting on someone's desk. And so I'm like, who's getting rich off of this? I mean, if you drive around in the city, as Greg and I are traveling everywhere, everywhere I look, I see a non-emergency medical transportation vehicle. When did these pop up? I mean, it's just, it's very disheartening, in fact, to see how much of our tax dollars, and it's more and more every year. It was 37 cents for every dollar. Now it's 41 cents of every dollar is going to Medicaid. And it's not because we're taking good care of people. It's because we are literally pissing money away, and some of it is being fraudulently taken from us.
I'm familiar with the transport piece that you're talking about. That I met it back in the day, and I saw the first generation of this coming in. And I'm going back 30 years ago when we started seeing the privatized arena coming in. And some of that had to do with some of the stuff coming over the border, but mostly it was fraud. And how they were just, everything was transport, as opposed to servicing it in a different way. So, yeah, that was a very frustrating deal for us in the actual EMS system, where we were doing emergent deals, and then the overrides were coming from the private sector. They were buying things out left and right. And they were gaming the system. And this is three decades ago, and they've mastered it now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's disheartening. You know, like I said, when you have an industry as complicated as healthcare that has only gotten more complicated each and every year, it becomes easier to game it because it's so complex. How are you going to find, it's a shell game. Where did the money go? Who's it going to?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story, Taralyn, on a very personal level. So my wife got 2 types of cancer several years ago, and we went in and we spent, she had coverage, but we were still $80,000 out of pocket for specialists over and above what we're paying once everything's covered. So they've gamed the system to figure out, oh, well, we'll bypass insurance coverage. You pay out of pocket over here on this specialty thing. So now phlebotomy is apparently a specialty. But we went in, and it's something that we learned. It was about 2 years ago. I opened up a bill, and I've got a $1,700 charge for hospital usage. So for going in, she goes in for a service, and the hospital sends the insurance company a $1,700 bill, which of course they don't pay, and then they send it to us. And I dug and dug and dug. So then the fight was on. It was for turning on the lights. It was for opening the doors of the hospital. My wife went in for, it was a radiology post-op exam, which essentially was, hey, let's see if the radiology is working on the cancer. They do the treatment. It's a 45-minute doctor visit, $1,700 hospital fee. And then I start going backwards, and I realized we had 8 of them because she had 8 different treatments for radiation. And so we had paid, not knowing, I thought this was going into the medical portion. So now I'm in a fight with the hospital and the insurance company. But yeah, $1,700. Just here, we're just charging you a fee because you walked into our door. The doctor's leasing the office downstairs, because they're leasing it. We can charge you this fee.
Micah, and I've talked to doctors, and they tell me, look, I'm forced to run tests that I know isn't going to change my diagnosis, but the hospital administration is demanding that I run these tests. Right? Why? Because they need to generate more income. Right? And so the doctors are like, I don't need to run these tests, but I'm forced to do it. And so to your point, I think we all in agreement, everybody in Colorado, we asked the question, why does it cost so much to be able to be treated, right, when we have an illness? And I think it's time to have like Taralyn as the lieutenant governor and myself and others say, we're going to ask the hard questions and we're going to figure it out. And we're going to let everybody know in the state what we found out.
Okay, I want to, if I could, for just a second, I want to have fun with you just for a moment. So, Air Force Academy graduation, we're there. We're a sponsor family for one of the kids. My daughter went to the Naval Academy. She had a sponsor family. So, young man graduates. We go down for the graduation, the flyover. J.D. Vance comes in. It's great. Everything's great. But we were sitting there, and the guy sitting next to me, he goes, oh, now I know what the vice president does. The vice president comes in, he does speaking engagements. So, what does a lieutenant governor do?
Well, it's a good question. And funny enough, the duties and obligations of the lieutenant governor are primarily at the behest of the governor. So there are some lieutenant governors who really don't do very much of anything. Greg and I do not have that type of working relationship, if you will. As Greg mentioned earlier, there are 16 departments, right, roughly, where he will get to appoint an executive director on top of all of those, and we will actually do that together. So as a former healthcare executive, I know what it takes to lead large-scale initiatives that impact millions and millions of people, and to do so in a way that puts people front and center, right? You gotta be fiscally responsible to manage, the budget here in the state. $46.8 billion is the current budget. Healthcare is 41 cents of that, $20 billion. And so who we appoint into these leadership positions, whoever we appoint as head of the Healthcare Policy and Finance Division is going to have a huge impact on how the state's money is handled and how people who rely on Medicaid, which is 1 in 5, are getting services from the state. And so that's something that I'm very excited about. I believe when you get the right leaders in place who are not only intelligent, but heart-centered and empathetic and able to make decisions in a very responsible, common-sense way with people at the center, you can have a very beautiful trickle-down effect if you put the right people in place. And so that's something I'm very excited to do with Greg. And, the other thing that Greg and I talk about a lot is the power of influence. And the governor's office, it is an executive office, and it's the bully pulpit. Right? If the governor wants to say something, if the lieutenant governor wants to say something, we can command the press once in office and put a lot of public pressure on the things that are happening in the state that are not going well. And that's one of my favorite things to do is bang the drum against government overreach. So very excited to do that. But it really is at the behest of the governor.
Exceptional answer. Thank you. Seriously. I was actually being obviously very tongue-in-cheek with the JD thing because people say, well, what does a vice president actually do? I did get a piece of that. You work at the behest of the governor. So technically, you could shift all the responsibility over to her and you could just be the pretty face of the whole thing, go out, do some fancy speeches, and behind the scenes, she's crushing all the work.
That's true.
Essentially.
I could do that. But
You
that's
could
not,
do that. But
that's not my
what's going
DNA.
to happen. No. No, thank you for answering because that actually is a very good answer. It was something somebody asked me the other day when I said the two of you are coming on. They said, well, can you find out what the lieutenant governor does? I said, yeah.
Yep.
And now we know you actually have a ton of responsibility through the behest of the governor, which
That's right.
And I haven't used behest in a while, so I might use that 2 more times. Behest. But thank you for answering because that really is an important deal. I think a lot of people I think people just assume too much. I think we have I hate to say this, but we have a very uneducated populace out here. And this is why you see so many party lines
Right.
and people screaming and, rather than digging into and actually finding out what people do, I'm grateful to know that you have somebody that has your kind of experience willing to come in and fight for somebody who's like my wife, who's just going, how do we survive $80,000 out of pocket
You don't.
when I'm paying $1,700 to a hospital for a fee
To turn
and I'm
on the
battling
lights.
for my life?
Right.
I've got not 1, but 2 types of cancer, and I'm trying to win this battle, and I've got to worry about this CEO making $68 million for this health company, which, there's certain things I can't say on air, but I can just tell you with my background, he's lucky he's walking right now.
Uh-huh.
Well, the last piece on this is illegal immigrants and healthcare that's provided here in Colorado. We had a conversation with Barb Kirkmeyer whenever she was on set talking about this issue, and this is one of the more fiery moments of the conversation. She mentioned, I think, just one program that was something like maybe $40 million to illegal immigrants' healthcare, multiple millions of dollars. I'm not exactly sure what that figure was, but that's just one program. Then we got somebody like Micah, retired peace officer. He should not be having to compete with a medical system that's giving millions of dollars to people who have done nothing for this country, nothing for the state, and are just here because it's a sanctuary state that's offering money and programs and welfare that it should not be, because then it's on the backs of people who are paying taxes, citizens who actually want to be in Colorado, that have actually paid back into Colorado, been here and fought for Colorado. And then someone like me and my wife, I mean, being independent business owners, not being W-2 employees of some company, we're paying hundreds of dollars every month for health insurance. But yet we've got programs for illegal immigrants that are getting free health care. And that to me is just unbelievable. So I'd like to know, and kind of I think that's a good way to be able to tie this conversation together, what we've already talked about, and maybe close it out with, what are your thoughts on specifically that?
Look, when it comes to illegal immigration, I'm a firm believer that nobody gets extra protection or extra rights. You know, in America, we treat everybody equally. And the interesting thing, though, is that when we do programs specifically for a segment of society, we have to put people on the back of the line. And that is wrong. That is absolutely wrong. For me, you know, the illegal immigration, first of all, we're not going to be a sanctuary state. That is not something that Colorado's about. Colorado needs to be a non-sanctuary state because we need to make sure that we're taking care of our own. You know, the safety net that we're talking about. When you open up an entirely different community to be part of that safety net starts getting weaker and weaker. And we start asking people to get in the back of the line. Our safety net is really designed for the disabled. It's designed for the seniors. It's designed for those that are not able to work, that they can't provide for themselves. But when you have healthy individuals that are taking part of a system, and they, like Taralyn said earlier, they game it in some manner because they don't really feel like they need to do much to earn that type of medical treatment, I think we need to reevaluate that. Look, do we want people to be sick? Of course not. Do we want people to be responsible? Yes. But government has to make sure that we create those boundaries, that we let people know what is the lane that you belong in. And again, when Governor Hickenlooper expanded Medicaid to people, he expanded it because he wanted to feel like he was helping a lot of people. The Democrat Party, if there's two ways to look at the political philosophies. The Democrat Party is about compassion, but they lose sight about how much that compassion is costing the taxpayers. The Republicans are looking to do it correctly. They're looking to do it in a manner where it's sustainable. And that's where the challenge comes in. And that's why I think it's important for us to understand we have to be compassionate, but only to a point. We cannot have a system that is not sustainable. And this is where we have the budget issues. And so I would say we're going to reevaluate that. Probably there's going to be some people that are not going to be happy because they're going to realize that all of a sudden they're not going to have the same benefits that they're accustomed to. Look, when I was in Congress, I sat on the budget committee. $39 trillion in debt is what our nation is in. $39 trillion. That's 14 zeros after the number. And yet every state wants the federal government to give them more money. We don't have money as a nation. We're using money that doesn't exist. So when we start cutting back, it's not because we're not compassionate. It's because we're realizing, you know what? We've been spending way too much money. We got to do it correctly. That's being responsible and transparent. And I think that's what the people are looking for in government, is a responsible government that is transparent, that can explain why are we spending the money that we're spending, and why are my taxes keep going up if nothing's changing. And I think that's where me and Taralyn are going to rewrite the rules to make sure that people understand it's about your quality of life. It's about everybody's quality of life. But more importantly, we want small business owners to be successful. We need them to thrive because you create jobs and you are what a community is all about. It's not corporate America. I tell people when I was at SBA, when corporate America sneezes, small business catches pneumonia. And so we must protect our small business owners, and that's what I'm going to do.
All right. We are doing decent on time. You guys okay on
Yep.
time right now?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good. So to finish out kind of talking about the political landscape, then we'll go into a more substantive conversation about faith and its role. But the last two things I think, and then Mike, if there's anything else that you think that needs to be discussed or asked, and I'm sure that you're going to have a lot to say just on these two things, but crime and judges. It's a conversation we continue to have on the podcast with a lot of different candidates and just people in general. But crime in Colorado right now is absolutely horrendous. The level of crime, there's a whole statistic. We put out a video just talking about where Colorado lands nationally, numbers for car theft, all kinds of different things. But one of the most atrocious metrics in Colorado is that you can rape up to 3 children in 3 different jurisdictions and still get probation. That's absolutely disgusting. And something needs to be done to fix how evil this state is, because that's just flat out evil.
Mm-hmm.
That we would have policies that allow somebody to get away with that. A lot of that is to do with, I think, judges that are soft on crime in blue states like Colorado and other states. But we need some kind of a solution to hold judges accountable. If they let a criminal out on the streets and they go and they commit another violent offense, that judges at that point should be responsible. It should not be on the criminal. It should be on the judge who let the criminal out. And then, of course, we need policies that are going to be harder on crime. So what does that look like if you end up winning this governor's seat in Colorado? How does this war on crime commence?
Well, look, instead of if, it's when I become the governor of Colorado. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, and Taralyn touched on it, the power of influence. And you mentioned it earlier. People don't know what's happening in the state. Most people don't know that every 5 months, the legislature passes 600 laws from January through May, every single year. Nobody knows what these laws are. Why? Because the governor's not sharing that and educating the community. So one of the first things that we will do is educate the populace. Did you know that in Colorado you can do this 3 times? And I will tell you, when you tell parents that, they're livid. How in the world can we have a state do that? But because no one's putting pressure on the legislature when they're voting, when they're putting these bills through the process, they fly through it. And that's where we are going to be the watchdogs of the legislative process and making sure that people understand you got to put pressure on your elected officials. Taralyn is a perfect example, right? You bang the drum, you beat the drum, and people come, right? And they stand up for the right reasons. So we will create that movement, because the only way we're going to change Colorado is to create a movement. It's not me as governor. It's not Taralyn as lieutenant governor. It's us leading a movement to change the state and make Colorado Colorado again. When it comes to the judges, I totally agree with you. You know what? We need to hold judges accountable for their decisions, because they believe that they can decide whatever they want.
But they have immunity.
Well, so how about we take immunity away from them, just like they did for the police officers, right? Let's treat them all the same, because they're all in law enforcement. You watch what happens if all of a sudden you say, we're going to take immunity away from you. All of a sudden, they're going to be a little bit more careful about how they're punishing people in the sentences.
We've never talked about that on here.
Never
Just
talked
kidding.
about-
That was a joke.
I was over
That
here
for the
just
whole world,
stargazing.
that is just like, so just the drum, banging the drum. I've said $1 million punitive damages per judge for a release. So guy comes in, heavy conviction, serious felony, judge lets him out on the street, $1,000 PR bond. That guy goes out, commits a similar or more egregious crime. The victim of that family has the right to come back in and sue the judge punitively.
Totally agree
$1
with
million
you.
bucks. You would watch crime turn around in Colorado in 90 days.
Oh, yeah. Look, and we got to send a strong message to the criminals. You know what? Not in Colorado. Not in Colorado. One of the reasons that our cost of living is going up on our groceries and also in just material items, people can go into these areas and steal, and no one stops them. No one stops anybody from shoplifting anymore.
It's interesting you say that. Somebody just now told me that I think over 50 license plates were stolen from the Meadows neighborhood here in Castle Rock just the other night.
Yeah.
License plates so they can go steal cars and put license plates on them. Crazy.
And think about it, right? Douglas County used to be considered one of the most safest communities, and yet crime is coming down.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it in that fashion, though, because they know that the sheriff here in Douglas County doesn't play. You know, he will hold you accountable. But the entire judicial system needs to be held accountable. From the district attorneys to the judges, you know, because the police officers are telling me, look, I arrest somebody, I hold them accountable, and within 24 hours, if not sooner, they're back out on the streets. And so we need to get back to actually enforcing the laws. If we enforce the laws, things shift. But we got to have strong people that are willing to go into communities and explain why we're doing this. This is not something that is targeted one community, the black community, the brown community. It's not targeting anybody. It's about making sure that as a society, we're holding each other accountable for our behaviors and our actions. And that's what we need to do when it comes to the judicial system.
As a woman, you've already told us that you feel the need to get a cattle prong. So all the crime and the issues in Colorado, what's your synopsis on this? How does this make you feel walking the streets, whether it be Denver or Castle Rock or Parker or somewhere in Jefferson County at this point? Where are you at with this?
You know, I really try not to walk in the city of Denver these days.
Don't blame you.
I stay in my tiny town of Kittredge where, you know, there's not much going on. It's the elk and the bears and the mountain lions that I really have to deal with. That's usually why I have a gun on me if I have a gun, is because we have a lot of wildlife out there. I'd rather deal with the wildlife than some of the crime that's happening in Denver. But, you know, overall, as an individual, just kind of watching the landscape here in Colorado, and I'm born and raised here too, fourth generation, grew up in Aurora. You know, I was aghast to see how much Second Amendment infringement we have in this state. I feel like everything that's going on, whether it has to do with crime or school shooting, they come after the Second Amendment as kind of a first action. And the numbers don't show any success there. I'm like, why are we infringing on our constitutional rights with nothing to show for it? I mean, Colorado ranks the highest in the country, one of the highest, for violent crime and property crime. That's insane. We had a 304% increase in human trafficking from 2015 to 2025. I was just looking up these numbers. That's insane.
Yeah.
And we have so much infringement on our rights, and I think we are actually less safe because, you know, they were trying to take away, I think it was maybe a couple years ago, you guys would probably know better than I do, the ability to open carry, right? That was a discussion that was on the legislative floor, the ability to open carry. And it really opened my eyes. You know, we all talk about safety, but there's a huge portion of our community, like the disabled, right? People in wheelchairs who were saying my ability to open carry in the state of Colorado actually deters people from exploiting me because I am in a wheelchair. If they can see that I have a gun on me, then I'm not an easy target. And I feel like in Colorado, I would like to see, you know, some of that being brought back. I used to open carry as a kid. You know, we were always down in Pueblo, and we have some property down in the mountains around there. And I would just, you know, at 8, 9 years old, I'd have my, you know, my 6-shooter on me, go into the gas station and walking around, and that was just normal. And I feel like we've gotten to a place where, like, you know, you can't do that anymore in Colorado, even though you legally can in every place but Denver. And I, you know, it's a tough topic for me to talk about safety because as a woman, open carry is really, really important for deterring folks. And sadly, in this state, I feel like they keep coming after our gun rights from the left and from, you know, from the left. And we're not seeing any statistical significance behind that, showing that there's any measure of relative success for all the infringement that we have had to suffer on our 2A.
I just spent 48 hours in Raton, and I didn't go anywhere where everybody didn't have a gun. Every restaurant I walked into, I mean, it was, I don't spend a lot of time right down there, but being down for this event, yeah, I was surprised everywhere I went. It's just kind of like farmland and ranch land, and yeah, it was like working out in Elbert County. Everybody carries a gun out there too. So,
Well,
Yes, we do.
I pulled this up. This just, I forgot that I had this saved. And then when we started talking about this in the cattle prong and all this, and also talking about illegal migrants and issues with crime. This is where I feel like we're not too far off from this. This is a video. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember where it was, but migrants walk the streets looking for unsuspecting white women to hit as hard as they can. Watch this video. Just walking by, and this is just one of many examples. And then we have a lot on the news of crimes against women, lots of it being from migrants. And you mentioned prices going up from crime. Well, I've also seen a lot of statistics showing that prices are going up just from accommodations that we're making for migrants in Colorado, and everything from house prices to insurance prices. We had, it wasn't Amanda Calderon, was it? It was Danielle Lamons talking about the insurance and talking about how our auto insurance is really skyrocketing because of illegal immigrants that are driving without insurance, and we get in accidents and they don't have insurance. And so the ones who have insurance, their insurance covers everything.
She was a multi-year agent, so she knew the system inside and out. But yeah, I mean, my daughter in the Navy out in San Diego, so that's where she was based, driving down, I think it was the I-5 something. Guy comes, freeway comes to a stop. Guy behind her hits her, nudges her into the guy in front of, which nudges the other guy. Between the four cars, maybe $1,000 in damage. The guy in the back, no insurance, no license. The guy that pushed her into, no insurance, no license. The guy in the front that got bumped, I mean, like, you come up and lean on his car, sued our insurance company because we were the only one that was insured. And my daughter was the one hit from behind. We've been fighting that for 14 months.
Yeah.
14 months on something we had. Now, had she not been run into by an illegal with no insurance or pushed into somebody who was illegal with no insurance, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. And I can tell you right now, they've gone after us and not the other. And they know who the people are. That's the crazy thing. They're just like, yeah, we're just not paying.
See, and that's what I'm talking about. It understanding the totality of what is happening, right? Legislation, giving driver's license, allowing people to drive without insurance and not holding them accountable. You know that they don't have insurance. We should be able to pull their license for at least 2 years, 3 years, to make sure that they understand when you drive on the roads of Colorado, you must be cognizant of who's also sharing the road with you, and you must be held accountable. But guys, what a lot of people don't understand, the culture is different, right? So if you come from Mexico, you grew up with a different way of thinking. You didn't grow up with the respect of looking at your neighbor or your communities. You really grew up in a sense of it's survival of the fittest. They're coming here, but they need to understand you need to assimilate. You need to become more aligned with our rules and our laws. Think about it. There are so many illegals that have CD licenses, right? The federal government is like, wait a minute.
CDL, you mean?
CDL, yeah. Again, the gentleman or the person that created that 17-car pileup a couple of years ago, that the governor, gave him a lower sentence. Again, illegal, but yet he had the license. How can we do that? And it all comes down to the regulatory agencies, right? DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies here.
I'm familiar.
Right? We need to revamp all that. We need to revamp how the motor vehicles look at who actually is getting a license, who's not getting a license. The reason that they have those licenses is that as a sanctuary state, they're not allowed to ask if you're an American citizen or not. Now think about that.
Yeah.
We need to be able to ask those questions because we need to understand what is happening out there in the roadways, what is happening with our insurance, what is happening with our communities. It's not that we don't necessarily want them here. We want them to be here properly and legally. But more importantly, we need them to be held responsible, just like we're being held responsible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just because we carry insurance and we're trying to follow the rule of the land, we're going to get sued. Our premiums are going to go up, and yet we were the victim.
It makes me not want to. I try to stay middle ground, Greg. I really do. I really, unless it's bona fide evil, then I know I'm going to stand in the face of to stop. So, in other words, some guy comes over, gets into your face, and he's starting to assault you. I'm going to step in as a man, right? Like that. That's bad.
Right.
But if it's unprecedented evil, where somebody's going to take somebody's life, I'm going to end that threat. I'll stand on that any day of the week that ends
Right.
in wine twice on Sunday. And what people think about it, as far as I could spit against a hurricane wind, I don't care. I will always stand in the face of evil. The flip side of that is good. If there's an opportunity to point out something that is productive and effective and prosperous, and it's going to benefit many, I will do that. Otherwise, I sit in the middle. And the reason I sit in the middle is because people will have their opinions on the left, the right. The point I'm trying to make is I've paid insurance, health, business, like all of it, since I was 16 years old. I've had 3 claims in my entire life. And I can tell you in all 3 claims, I had to fight and fight and fight. And I don't mean claims for me. Like I'm talking about including my daughter who got run into. We're fighting this thing, right? So I'm spending thousands of dollars. And I finally just got to a point, it's like, well, why do I even have insurance then? And that sadly is, I think, what it drives people to. Because they're looking at people coming over the border. They're like, look, I love humanity. Just go through the process. I don't think anybody would argue that. Just go through the process. But when you're handing something out for free, it disenfranchises everybody else. And you're sitting back and you're going, well, wait a second. It's costing me X amount of money to live in this state or somewhere else. Now I'm getting ripped off. You know it. Now you got government overreach. You got insurance overreach. And on top of it, I've got insurance, but I got to pay $80,000 out of pocket, which, by the way, to Dora, to that point, my wife's a psychologist, mandated to get the COVID shot or she loses her license.
Yep.
Mandated. You get COVID shot or we're taking that degree away that you worked all your years for, 31 years of private practice, you're going to be out of business if you don't do this thing that we tell you. And now we're fairly certain that the COVID shot caused the cancer because now there's thousands of cases of almost identical symptoms from the same shot that my wife has. Almost identical. So I plan on having, I'm looking at a major lawsuit with Dora, sitting down and going, I'm tired. And people are tired. And I think they want, part of the reason I'm impassioned over this, and I'm so glad that we have the prospective governor, lieutenant governor sitting in together. This is so cool having both of you here because I get to look back and forth. I want people to fight. And I want people, but not just 2 people going forth to fight. I want the American people to fight. I want people to get educated and fight. Greg Lopez is not going to come in and solve Colorado's problems. Colorado has to solve Colorado's problems through the support of, and whatever your candidate is. I'm not here, picking sides. Just comes down to, we need to get educated. And people just don't understand. You said the most important thing so far in here, and it's been said by several, hundreds of legislative laws are passed in a few months period of time. That right there is, to me, is the number one problem that we have in this state right now is we are over legislated on everything. So over here, I can't ask if this person is here legally or not, but we're going to give them a CDL. But over here, I'm filling out an application to go get something from my gun, and it says male, female, or non-binary. Since when did non-binary become a thing on an ATF check? So it's just stuff like this that just drives me crazy. I could go off the rabbit trails all day long, but I want people to fight.
Well, and to that point, Micah, a lot of people don't understand education, right? And giving people, empowering them to fight. Okay. Do you know that right now, every legislature, there's 100 of them, okay, in the state capitol.
Yeah.
They're all eligible to bring 5 bills on their own.
Yeah.
And then there's extra bills that leadership allows, right? That's how you get to the 600. There's no law that says you must introduce 5 bills. This is an internal policy of the legislature. When I tell people that that's how many laws, people, their hair catches on fire.
Yeah.
What we should do is say, you know what? No, you only get 2. You only get 2 bills. That's 200. Because now you can read them. Now you can debate them. Now you can understand them. When you're trying to push 600 bills, and notice what they do. They do all the easy ones in the beginning, from January through the 1st of March, all the easy ones. And then from March to May, they pile the calendar, they're working late at night, and they're pushing all these bills and nobody has time to read them. No one has time to understand them. They're just voting based on party lines. And that's wrong. The best way for us to have a good state in this here in Colorado, I believe we must have the House controlled by one party and the Senate controlled by the other. Because now debate must happen before any bill gets to the governor's desk. But when you have the House and the Senate controlled by one party, and it's also the same party that controls the governor's office, that's a single party rule. And that's what we've been under.
So I have one last question, and I'm going to hand everything over to Jared on faith. You mentioned something important earlier. You said independent, unaffiliated.
Mhm.
Over here, Democrat, Republican numbers. So 23, 25.
Mhm. 25 Democrat, 23 Republican.
Yeah, so that would put, what,
50.
50
Unaffiliated.
point something unaffiliated. I'm hearing people on the left and the right say we need the independent voters. Are you saying I need the Republican Democrat voters? Because you're the populace you're going for would be more the middle ground, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So do you need a percentage of either of the other
oh, yeah.
big two?
Yeah, look, I mean, the numbers.
I mean, you're fighting for all the people. I get
No.
that.
But look, it's like anything else, right? To get elected, you need votes. Money doesn't get you elected. It's the voters who is actually voting for the candidate. So, yeah, I am going to get votes from the conservative side of the aisle because I am predominantly conservative. They know that. I'm fiscally responsible. I want small business to thrive. I want safe communities, right? I defend the Constitution. I carry the Constitution in my pocket every day. And then I have the other side of the aisle, the Democrats that understand small business, that want to be compassionate, that want to help people up to a point. And so, yes, I'm going to take votes from the Democrat side of the aisle and Republicans. But predominantly, it's going to be the unaffiliated voters that say, finally we have a candidate that understands government, understands our struggles, understands that the two-party system is failing us, and is willing to step in the gap and say, we're going to try something different. We're going to put people over politics.
That's good.
What role do you think faith plays in politics?
It should play 100%. I'm a firm believer. The two things they tell us we should never talk about, we should always talk about. Religion and politics, right? Because politics is the moral fabric by which we're trying to create society. And if we don't have a strong moral foundation, then we're lost. We don't know what to do. We start doing things that are more easily pleasurable for us and others than actually looking at how do we build a society that will always be stable, that we will have a strong foundation. It plays a huge role. It plays a huge role in my life, and it plays a huge role when I make decisions. Just to give you an idea, when I was in Congress, I had this chair in my office. It was white, and it had a purple cloth over it. No one could sit in that chair. You know why? Because my Lord and Savior sat on that chair every day. So when I needed to make a tough decision, when I was struggling on what way should I vote on this, I always had a conversation with my Lord and Savior. I'm always talking to him. I'm asking him to guide me. I'm asking him to give me the wisdom to make good decisions. Do I do it right all the time? Of course not. But at least I know where to go for guidance. And I think the more people did that, the better off we would be as a society. The one rule that I want to make sure as governor I instill in the minds of our young and the minds of every individual is the golden rule. Just treat others the way you would like to be treated. If we can do that, we're on the path to the right direction.
Were you raised in faith, or did you have a moment where you came to faith? And even if you were raised in faith, and I don't like to ask that question and just let it be a blanket statement, because even if you were raised, there still is a time in everyone's life where they have to make that decision for themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Tell us a little bit, maybe share a little bit of a testimony of whenever faith really became as important to you as it is now.
I would tell you that I was raised Catholic, but I wouldn't. I would say, at least in my household, it was a very unique way of practicing religion. The family went to church. The women and the children went into the church. The men stayed outside. They never walked in, right? And then after church, everybody went home, and then there was always a barbecue. There was always a cookout, and family would gather.
You sure you're not Southern Baptist?
They would all gather, and if we weren't careful, depending on how long people stuck around, there was always a fight. There was always an argument, a big blowout. Okay, so I really didn't understand religion until I left the house and joined the military. And when I was feeling lonely and I couldn't go because I wasn't around the clan, I found that, there is a Bible that I can pick up. And I had one, I just never opened it. And so I started opening it. And so I started to get deeper in my faith and my spiritual journey, right? But I will tell you, it's my wife, unfortunately, and I'm embarrassed to say this because I've learned that it should be the man that leads the family in their spiritual journey. But for me, it happened to be my wife that started us on this journey. And so I love her to death. She's my soulmate. There's a reason why the Lord brought us together. And I would tell you, I tell her, there's a special place in heaven for her for putting up with me for 38 years, But our family went through this struggle with our daughter. When she was 13, she ended up having this illness that the Western medicine could not figure out. And so as a freshman, I'll give you an idea. As a freshman, she went to school probably 50% of the time. As a sophomore, she went probably 22% of the time. As a junior, she went maybe 9% of the time. And as a senior, she probably went 4% of the time. And we had to help her with her homework. We had to help her but we found ourselves on our knees asking the Lord to heal her. And when we were on our knees, we realized He is there. And when He healed her, and it took a while, but we saw the healing happen. And it wasn't modern medicine. I would tell you, modern medicine, their conclusion at the end was, it's in her head. It can't be in her head. I know my daughter. But by the grace of God, she healed. And I am a strong testament of watching miracles happen day in and day out. But we must slow down and pay attention. We must be peaceful. If we take the time to just spend a little quiet time with our Lord, He will talk to us. And I share that with everybody. A lot of people struggle because they've never taken the time to sit still. Just sit still and watch what God has created. And so that's been my spiritual journey. Chris Hernandez, him and I, we go to a men's Bible study every Monday morning. It starts at 6:30 in the morning.
We got you beat by 45 minutes.
Chris is a bigger giver than I am, I'll be honest.
Our Mondays are at 5:45 a.m.
Yeah.
We have a Monday men's group.
Yeah. And so, you know what? But starting the week with our Lord and understanding, our role and amongst men, right? Mm-hmm. Where we are able to share. Because us guys, we don't share very often with each other unless we feel we're in a safe environment, a brotherhood of some sort.
Yeah.
And so that's my testimony as it pertains to, and I give all the credit. Everything I've ever achieved in my life, I take no credit to it. I give it all to the Lord. And when we become the governor of this great state, it is His glory that's going to be reflected, not mine.
I only have one short rabbit trail question. Is there a one-legged Indian there by the name of David Welch in your group?
Yes, there is. And as a matter of fact, I think he's looking to relocate to another state. But yes,
He is.
Yes,
He is a funny
he is
funny guy.
He is.
that there's a whole story within a story there. We got to talk off air about David. Oh my gosh. That guy's a hoot.
Well, thank you for sharing that
Yep.
testimony. That's something that we always want to make sure we're coming back to and making the bedrock of the conversations that we're having here on the Daily Carry podcast, because it's not just about carrying gear, carrying guns and knives, but it's also, you see on the logo, carrying our cross, denying ourselves, carrying our cross, following Jesus. And so that would bring us to now you, Taralyn. I don't know how much you have to share, but we'd love to hear everything you're willing to share
Yes.
on your faith journey.
You know, I'm excited to share because I hopefully it's a story that some listeners will resonate with. So I was raised Catholic. We only went to church, though, on Christmas and maybe Easter.
Creasters, that's what we call them.
Yeah. and there was no Bible involved whatsoever, you know, but I did believe in Jesus and I loved the Lord. And sadly, I must have been, I don't know, maybe 19, maybe 18 or 19. I was at the Denver Museum of Art and Science, and I happened to stumble upon a cosmic calendar. Have you guys ever seen those?
Yes.
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 Oh my gosh. Worst day of my life, because I said, hey, you know, I'm here on my own. I wasn't there with a field trip, and I wanted to read everything. And so I turn the corner, there's this huge cosmic calendar, and I read everything, and it's going through the creation of the universe. And then, and it did it in like, you know, month by month. And it was like December, like, you know, 30th at like, you know, 11:59 p.m. Like, there's humanity. And it broke my brain. In that instant, I logically could not believe in God, because I was faced with the reality, how was this created for us, as I was taught, if we just got here? I mean, if you look at it, really, it was created for the dinosaurs, right? And so that was my thinking at the time. And that catapulted me into a journey that went all the way until November of last year. So November 2025. So between the age of 19 and November 2025, I was on an exploration to understand the universe. I said, okay, well, this thing's been going on for billions of years. Let's understand the universe. And I dove into theoretical physics, quantum computing. I mean, I was all about science. And funny enough, December of last year, my fiance comes into the room. We were bored, had nothing to watch. He goes, you want to watch The Chosen? I go, I really don't. I have no interest in watching The Chosen. He's like, well, you know, I think we should. And I was like, all right, man, whatever, put it on. So he puts on The Chosen, and I'm kind of like scrolling on my phone. I'm half listening. And there's early on in the season, there's an episode where Jesus makes a joke about soon. The soon being relative in like a time scale, right? And he says soon. And I said, well, that's funny. I said, did he really allude to the fact that time is relative? Did Jesus really say that? And so I start diving in, and I find out that, yes, God actually spoke about time being relative. He spoke about, for him, you know, 1,000 years happens kind of in a day in our time scale. And when I realized that God knew of time's relativity and that the earth and the world was created through his word, I mean, that's how science, vibration is at the center of everything. Everything is energy. The table is vibrating just at a different frequency than we are. Inanimate objects, right, all have a different frequency. Everything is energy. And I started to see that, oh my gosh, you know, what a patient Lord. He allowed me to deny him my entire adult life and turn strictly to science and an understanding of the universe, and then patiently was waiting for, he came into my life as suddenly as he left. I saw that cosmic calendar and poof, he was gone. It wasn't a cognitive choice that I made. I simply could not believe in him anymore. And he came back just as suddenly and without my decision making. I said, oh my God, he's been there the whole time. And of course, the king of the universe is going to be perfectly aligned with everything that I had learned about science. The two are not in conflict. They are actually in perfect synergy. I actually have tattooed on my wrist 1 divided by 0, which is what happened mathematically when they tried to compute the center of a black hole, which combined, you know, quantum, like Einstein's theory of, you know, classical relativity with like quantum mechanics. They got 1/0, which means that the math broke. So there's something fundamental about our universe that we don't understand. And God allowed me to go on an exploration of the universe and then was patiently waiting for me when I realized the whole time I was simply understanding his creation. And ever since then, I've been opening up the Bible and reading scripture. And now on our political journey, my favorite thing is Matthew, I think it's 10:16, Behold, I send you out sheep amongst wolves. Be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And I think about that all the time because politics is not a friendly arena in any way, shape, or form. And I feel very much, like the disciples did when he sent him out with nothing on their backs, no extra money, no extra clothes. And the lesson was to have faith that the Lord is going to provide. He's going to take care of you. He's going to watch over you. And that was a lesson as much as it was getting out into the community and preaching. And as we go out and meet with people, and I have encounters that, prompt me to get a cattle prod, I think of the scripture and I think of the lessons and I think of the Lord. So he's been very recent in my life, again, as of November of last year. But I'm really doing everything I can to make up for all the lost time.
Wow. That's an incredible testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. That is amazing. That's awesome. I think that I've asked the amount of questions that we have enough time to ask today. So do you have anything else to ask in conclusion here, Micah?
Not a question, just gratitude. I appreciate you guys both coming on. I feel like you really are sharing your hearts today. You can feel your compassion, drive, energy, and motivation, but I really love the challenge of educating Colorado, bringing people together. I think people are tired. I'll go back to I think it was one of your opening statements. People are tired. They're fed up. I had this conversation coming back from Raton yesterday. We had a 3-hour drive and we talked about it. We said, how do we feel? Just two men sitting in a truck, pretty open dialogue between the two of us. And the word betrayed came up twice. Right. Betrayal. And so I appreciate it. I feel authenticity, strong authenticity here.
Well, yeah, I tell people, you see what you get. This is us, right? We're not changing who we are. We're not changing our values. We stand for being genuine and helping people. And we'll let the people decide, right? The divide that is here in Colorado, both in rural and urban, and even amongst our own communities, it's counterproductive to our quality of life. So our goal is to close the divide, bring some conversation to the table without any name callings, without any finger pointing. Doesn't matter who caused what. Let's fix it.
Yeah.
Let's work on it for the betterment of everybody, not just us, but the younger generation, right? Those that are still in preschool, because these decisions are long-lasting decisions.
Can I just say that it's refreshing that out of every gubernatorial candidate that we've had discussions with which, by the way, majority of the Republican candidates we've had interviews with twice over, one of them 3 times over. And you are the only person to sit in that chair that I can remember and not have some open criticisms of the other candidates. I don't think I've heard one remark from you going after any of them. Just kind of staying in your lane and doing your thing. And I do admire and I respect that. So thank you for that, because it's been refreshing. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Where can people find you if they want to get behind you and support you, sir?
Go to greglopez.co, greglopez.co. Go there, volunteer, make a contribution. Like you said earlier, Micah, our journey, our election really starts June 30th, and it's going to be a very interesting ride. But like anything else, we need money to get our message out there. You know what? And I tell people, it doesn't matter whether it's $5, $50, whatever you feel comfortable. Because a lot of people think, well, the only thing I need to do is vote. Well, that's important. But you also need to support, whether it's phone calls or financially. Because money is important, but money doesn't get you elected. It's the candidate that can actually keep their hand on the pulse of the people.
Do you guys have a media team?
As far as
promotion, putting stuff out, marketing. I mean, is it internal? Is it you and your family?
You know, it's Chris Hernandez,
Uh-huh.
right? But for us to say, do we have a huge team out there that we work with constantly every day, every week? No.
Okay. Just curious. It's
Yep.
just more of a, because when you hit the ground running July 1st, you're going to have to start banging some stuff out there.
Oh, yeah.
So
Speaking of which, we may be able to help a little bit with that because we have had a gubernatorial shootout series with all the Republican candidates. And if you guys are interested, you already have your lieutenant governor. So if you guys would be interested in making some time going out to the range with us, Teddy Collins is gracious and he's opened up his range for us to go use anytime. It's about 20 minutes from here in Larkspur. So if you got time available and you'd like to do a gubernatorial shootout series with us, we'd love that.
But we all got to use a 6-shooter revolver.
I am actually down with that. I've got a handful of them I'll bring.
Yeah.
We'll go up against Miss 22 over here, who will probably just smoke us all. That's okay, though. I'm right. I'm secure in my manhood.
Awesome. Well, we'd love to accommodate that. Love to set that up and hopefully do that before you get too busy in this race starting in July for, getting this final stretch before November. But thank you again. Thank you. Let me see. I'll get it right here on the sign off. Former Congressman, Congressional District number 4.
Yes.
Thank you for your time today, Greg. And thank you for your time today as well. Appreciate both of you being on set with us and having a conversation with us. And thank you for sharing your testimonies and your faith. And I hope that people online listening to this have both been informed and encouraged by you being here today. We end every single episode with prayer. Would you be willing to say that prayer for us, sir?
Of course I would. Heavenly Father, we just want to give you thanks and praise for everything that you do for us every single day. As we walk out in our communities, let our light shine. Let people know that we are a compassionate people, that we're brothers and sisters. We're not enemies. We are from the same Lord. We have the same Father. Just bring us together, Father. We've been lost for so long. And I just ask that you watch over our families, you watch over our businesses, you watch over our communities. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. If you enjoyed this episode online, please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. And last thing we need is if you guys both don't mind to sign the wall for us, then that'd be awesome.
Yes. Thank
All right.
you.
All right.
Thanks again.